Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome to the workshop. Today we'll be building up another Colnago Y1Rs, but since we have a bit more time now, I want to show you the frame and its distinct features, plus the build kit that we're going to put on it. So let's start with the build kit first, because that's not so exciting at this point. So we have a standard Dura-Ace Di2 12-speed group set, obviously the levers. The rear derailleur has a ceramic speed Alpha RS cage, which is a product that I really like. It has a design that's been improved quite a lot. It's much more sturdy and durable, and also quiet with these new CFRP pulley wheels that have a labyrinth seal in them, so you don't actually need to service them all that often. So all around excellent product, really highly rated. Then we have the Dura-Ace calipers, and of course the necessary wiring, battery, so all the standard kit. A few other upgrades include the amp carbon backed organic brake pads. These work really great. Bit better stopping power and modulation than standard, particularly if you're using aftermarket rotors. I really highly recommend these. I love them with my carbon TI rotors, and it's probably the best combination there is on the market. And then we have the Cybre crank arms with the 24mm titanium spindle. In this case also equipped with the Power2Max NG SL power meter, which is one of the best power meters on the market. That's why we use it on a lot of builds. If you've seen the previous videos, you might have noticed that. And on this particular case we also have the Cybre Metarbon chainring kit, which is an aero double chainring kit. The outer chainring is an aluminum with the hollow construction, so similar to Shimano, stiffened by this carbon fiber outer plate, which looks really cool, slightly lighter than Shimano as far as I can tell, and yeah, good shifting, good aerodynamics all around. Obviously mounted with this Cybre 2x bolt set, which are all products that are available through our website and will be linked below. In this case we also have some Look titanium pedals with ceramic bearings. Look is probably my least favorite pedal brand, but this customer insisted on using them. So that's what we have as far as the part goes, or the parts go. Now let's have a look at the more important aspect of this build, and that's the frame set. Starting with the handlebar. Now this is a size large, so mostly equivalent to a 56 in most other bike brands. So basically 1-to-1 in terms of geometry with the 56 Tarmac. So you can easily find your fit based on that. The handlebar that comes with this standard is 125/397/420. What that means? So it's a one-piece aero handlebar in this wing shape, so there is no traditional stem as such, but the 125 refers to the virtual stem length, basically what you get, so that's the equivalent of that, and 125 is the size that you get as standard with the large frame. You get 105 with the S, 115 with the M, and 125 with the L. And then the width of the bar, it's basically available in two widths, and both of them are flared. So this is the wider one, still pretty narrow at 397. Center to center at the tops and 420 in the drops, and the narrower one is 377 at the tops, 400 in the drops, which is what I would use personally. And most of these combinations are available, so I think apart from the smallest width and the longest stem option and vice versa, those are not available. Everything else is, although they're quite hard to come by at this point. So if you're looking for a specific fit, you might need to wait a few weeks until these become available from Colnago again. So that's the handlebar, I think one of the distinct features of this frame set. And what you can tell immediately is that it's super stiff and really weird when you're riding the bike, because it's not a side that you're used to seeing. But the shape actually is really good. It has a compact reach, nice to reach the handlebars, and it closely mimics the shape of the NV handlebars, which Team UAE also uses, and for that reason I really like this shape, because that's my preferred shape anyway. So that's what we have here. One thing that we've done for one of the customers is cut off the end of the drops, because they're just really damn long, and if you're riding a bike with a relatively short reach like the size S with the 105 stem, for example, then it can hit your knees. So yeah, that's a bit, if you install it on the bike, it seems a bit overly long in the drop section, not really necessary, as you can see. So that's one modification that we've done. And the bar also comes with an integrated computer mount with a 1-bolt design, and this actually isn't proprietary. It's the same that they use on the Colnago CC1 handlebar, which comes on the V4RS, V5RS, the G4X, and the C68. C68 gravel, all those. So it's basically one standard for Colnago, which is a neat thing to see. There's no need of buying a separate computer mount. Then, sticking with the front of the bike, we have the pretty radical looking hinge fork. So this is not too dissimilar to what you would find on a full-on time trial bike. But the construction actually and the headset preload is done slightly differently, due to the fact that, well, you have to have a basic or a standard-ish road bar on top, so you can't get away with a few things that you can get away with on a time trial bike. Because of this reason, actually the bottom and the top of the fork are basically, it's a monocoque, so one part really. On most time trial bikes the top screws on, and that's how you adjust via some preload nut on the top the headset preload. Here it's done very differently. So the way to do that is to insert a separate axle from the top into the frame. This bolts down via a bolt through the bottom, and then you have a threaded collar that goes onto here, which you use to press down on the headset, and that's how you preload it. Then you have a tightening fork, basically, which is a small tool that you use to do that, and the neat thing is you don't actually need to undo anything to adjust the preload, so that's quite neatly done, but I'll show you that in a minute. And then when you're ready with the setting, then you just use this pinch bolt to pinch it all down so it doesn't move and your preload doesn't change as you're riding. Because of the integration, the front steering axle also has to accommodate the internal routing of the rear brake, which is done through a slot here, and actually the whole thing is slotted so it can be removed and installed in only one specific place where everything needs to sit exactly where you want it, and it's further secured by this pinch bolt on the top. So that's how the fork construction works. Okay, so now let's have a look at the small parts and all the details that you get with the frame. The fork, as I already described, is a hinge design. Now let's have a look in a bit more detail. So this is the preload ring that sits on it when installed inside the frame, and it goes onto this thread, so it's basically right underneath here when installed. You have to basically drop this in and then basically hinge the fork over it and then put in the axle from the top and tighten it with this bolt from the bottom. This actually has a neat little rubber seal on there as well. Needs to be properly Loctite coated to make sure it doesn't come loose. And yeah, that's basically the assembly. In the frame itself there also goes this star-shaped little insert, which is basically a steerer stop, which you do need due to the design of the fork, obviously, to make sure that it doesn't overextend and damage the frame. The headset comes from Ceramic Speed, so they use the SLT bearings in there, which again is a neat touch, because in these integrated bikes these can potentially last a lot longer since they have a solid lubricant in them. It doesn't wear out that easily, so you don't need to reassemble the bike that often. Obviously with a bike like this, full integrated, if you need to change the headset bearings, then you need to undo everything basically. Although, yeah, in this particular case, not the front brake, but you still need to at least undo the hose from the lever to make it reach out enough so you can pull out the handlebar. Speaking of the handlebar, it sits on top of this fork crown via 4 bolts, so just like this. The stack is adjusted in a very similar fashion to what you would see on a time trial bike. So you have these split spacers that you can remove anytime, so there's just enough space to pull it over the brake hoses. There's no need to cut anything, which is really great. And then depending on how many spacers you use, you have a diagram which shows you which bolt lengths you need to use. So there's always 2 longer ones in the front, 2 shorter ones in the back, with some washers to make sure it doesn't damage the carbon when tightening. And yeah, these are basically M6 bolts, pretty standard as far as I can tell. So potentially these could be swapped to titanium, I think. Probably potential for weight saving. And when all that is done, another thing you need to do is to install the rear cover, which sits in the small opening between the handlebar and the frame to make sure there's a smooth transition. We'll show you this on the complete bike. And there are a few versions for these, again for each possible stack height, to make sure that all of them are pretty neat. And a great thing about this design is even if you have the stack on maximum, which you could potentially use for aerodynamics, you know, to bring up the front and have a deeper tuck, it still doesn't look awkward like you would get with normal spacers and a chimney, where it looks pretty bad, to be honest. This one does away with that, so actually I find the whole setup to be really neatly designed. They also thought about small things like little plugs. These I think are, well, on the first units that we have received, these were actually 3D printed. Now they're injection molded as time progresses. So these sit into the recess of the handlebar where the bolts are located, so you have a nice flush fit in there. So yeah, very neat. This is the little tool that you use to adjust the preload ring, which, yeah, so this sits here and you can access it from any point. Although even if you do lose it or you simply don't have it, there are these openings, or you can use a small tool of a similar shape to just adjust it. It really isn't as difficult as it might seem at first. Yeah, another handlebar accessory, of course, is the computer mount, as mentioned before. So this is a GoPro standard, and in the previous models a lot of people have been complaining because this used to be really low quality. Now it's actually an aluminum unit, and you can adjust the reach of it, and you get different inserts for, well, this one is for Garmin, obviously. You also get one for Brighton, for Sigma, and for Wahoo. So yeah, I think that's a big improvement over the previous versions. If you go further down the frame, then you have yeah, basically what I've talked about right now is all of the front area. If you go further back, then of course you have the integrated bottle cages, which also house the Di2 battery. So because it doesn't fit in the seat post, and here it's kind of an awkward arrangement for the wiring to be routed through, use this little cover. So the battery sits right in here, and this one is then held in place by the integrated bottle cage, although it doesn't have to. This this is a basic plastic unit made by Elite, I would presume, because also on the time trial bike it's made by Elite, and the supplied bottles are also. But anyway, this could potentially be just glued here and used with standard bottle cages to save some weight, like Today uses on his bike. And then the rear bottle cage is much more standard, but still it's a very basic plastic unit. So that's another piece of integration. Obviously, I think basically everyone is familiar with the shaping of the frame itself, so I don't think I'll go into too much detail about that. What is interesting though is the seat post arrangement. So you have this relatively small seat post because of the design. The chainstays don't really drop, or it's kind of specific. So you get this seat post. It exists in a few different lengths and two offsets. So this is the more offset one. Because of the angle, the setback that you have adjusted quite dramatically changes with the saddle height. So that's why different offsets are needed. It's a traditional two-bolt design as for the clamping. The neat thing is that you also get different styles of bolts depending on if you use a saddle with a cutout, then you get a bolt with a standard hex head, or internal hex head should I say, and if you use a closed up saddle, then you also get one with an external hex. Because of the small section, I would imagine, there's also a stiffening rib running alongside the seat post, and it's actually pretty light, although the hardware not so much, but the Remo version exists, so that's a future potential upgrade. The rubber cover sits obviously at the place where the seat post enters the frame, and it's a relatively standard wedge actuated by a hex bolt from the top, which then presses on the seat post to secure it. In more cases than not, the length has to be cut to size. You do have some leeway, obviously, although I don't really see a minimum insertion listed anywhere here, so I assume it's really rather minimal. But it could have been some useful information. Maybe it is in the manual. That's something I haven't checked, but we'll check that for this bike. Yeah, the rear, of course, the not so traditional king shape. Now, as it is with a lot of new releases, the bike also uses a UDH standard for rear mech hanger, which is what we're also going to use. Sits in right through here. In this case also it's a direct mount version to fit the Shimano rear mech, although what you do get included is a standard one for non-direct mount. Of course, you also get some through axles. These are, well, nothing special really. The front one actually is very similar to what Colnago have been using earlier. The rear one has a different thread pitch due to the UDH standard. Some other small touches that they include are these small little stickers. These go into onto the fork, where you can use them to cover the opening of the through axle. Pretty neat. although to be perfectly honest, it could have just been covered by carbon like Pinarello uses these days. Rubber plugs for routing of the wires. It's pretty common. You get some carbon grip tape or paste, sorry, and chainstay protector comes in handy, and some foam tubing to cover the brake hoses to prevent them from rattling in the frame. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Actually quite a lot of small parts that are included. This is a frame set only and came as such. If you're buying this as a complete bike, you also do get matching bottles for the bottle cages. You get a similarly shaped race number mount for the seat post, which goes into here. And if you go on Colnago's website, then you can actually download the file for a timing chip holder, which you can then 3D print yourself from plastic, and that goes onto right here in the bottom of the fork and puts the timing chip right here where it sits out of the wind. So yeah, at this price they could have just included it, but still that's not a huge cost or a huge trouble to have that printed. Not everyone uses it, and it's a neat thing to have, and the fact itself that they share it with us. Okay, I think that's all the details covered. Of course, if you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below so I can answer them. Now it's time to build this bike up, and then I'll show you the end result.